Hey, here it is. What is it today? It is Monday, the 25th of November. Wow, the dates fly by. It's almost Thanksgiving. Listen, today I'm going to give you a freight broker rate transparency update. What you need to know. That's what we're going to talk about today. If you're a freight broker or a freight agent, definitely going to want to lean in. That's what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to give you what the update is from the FMCSA. And then I may sprinkle in my opinion and thoughts on it. And if you know me by now, I have some pretty strong thoughts about it. So if you don't, brace. If you do, some of this might not be a shock, but hang tight because that's what we're going to talk about today. So what do we got? So here's the lineup here. Hit me up in the comments with the city and state you're logging in from. I'll do some shout outs. Then we're going to jump into the live training. Not necessarily training, but we're going to talk about the rate transparency update. And then we're going to do live Q&A at the end. If you have questions about what I go over today or freight broker startup, sales, rating, finding carriers, dispatching, any of those questions or topics you have questions about, you can feel free to stick around to the end, ask those questions, and I will do my absolute best to try to answer them for you. Okay. So before we get started, if you're excited about today's update, hit the like button. If you've ever learned anything from any of my other lives, okay, hit the like button, share the stream, let me know, and hit me up in the comments with the city and state, and I'm going to do some quick shout outs. Okay, so cool. Julie Savage, welcome. Anthony, welcome. North Transfer from Minnesota, welcome. Pacer from, welcome. Pacer Cook. What do we got? Old Young from Illinois, Betty Jones from Wilson, North Carolina, Anthony from Moody, Texas, Brian from Independence, Oregon, welcome. Jordan from Naples, Florida, Alfonso from Meriden, Connecticut, Staborn Ali from Atlanta, Julie from Utah, Helen from New York City, welcome. We got people from all over the country. I'm sure at some point someone from Europe or maybe South America or who knows, the Ukraine, wherever, may end up joining in. We have people from all over the world that join these lives, and I'm totally appreciative that you guys take time out of your busy day to do this. This is a weekly free training I do every Monday at noon. So grab your phone or set a reminder on your computer and remind yourself every Monday at noon I do these lives. All you got to do is jump onto my YouTube channel, jump on my LinkedIn, or maybe my Facebook page, and I stream it there every single week. I've done hundreds of these lives over the years and always have great feedback from everybody. So thank you so much. So today we're going to talk about the FMCSA rate transparency update, right? The freight broker rate transparency update that just came out here in the last, I think, 4 or 5 days. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. I'm going to give you my thoughts on it, give you what you need to know, and then we'll go from there. So let's see who else we got. Thomas from Chicago, Janie Ward from Spokane, Washington, No Books to Ball from Chicago, Highway Headlines from Ohio, Danielle from Cincinnati, Maine Elamari from Mokina, Illinois. Okay. Brittany, welcome. So welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. We got a pretty good crowd live. I know a lot of people catch this on replay. If you are watching this on replay, no matter where you're at, hit me up in the comments with hashtag replay. I love to hear from my replay folks. Truly appreciate you guys joining me whenever you can. Okay. Let me grab a quick drink now. A lot of notes. Okay. So we got a lot of notes here to go over. So there's, I don't think this is going to be a lengthy training, but I do want to get into some details about what's proposed and how to kind of navigate this whole thing as a freight broker. Okay. So let me grab a quick drink and then we'll jump into, and Corey from Billings, Montana, as usual. Welcome, Corey. Listen, we're about to get snow here next week. You got to be getting snow soon. You're in Montana. I'm sure you guys are. All right. So let me just review this really quick, make sure I got what I need. And all right. Oh, 3 inches yesterday. Well, how much snow do you normally get in a year? Like how many inches or how many feet? I mean, and where are you in Montana? I'm just curious. I mean, we can chat about this at another point, but yeah, I want to jump into this, but I am curious. And I'm sure other people are too, because you hear about Montana getting absolutely crushed with snow. So no different than Buffalo, I guess. We get a ton of snow too. I think we get an average about 90 inches a year, but there are some areas where we get just south of Buffalo, on kind of what they call the snow belt, they get average over 200 inches a year. That's a lot of freaking snow, right? Okay, so back to the topic at hand. So today I'm here to share with you an update from the FMCSA about the freight rate transparency debate, the big debate that's been going on between OIDA, the TIA, and the FMCSA. Basically, a disagreement about freight rate transparency for freight brokers, okay? So this has been going on for a while, but just the other day, the FMCSA put an update out, which is designed to kind of clarify what they're thinking in regards to rule changes and how it would impact all parties, okay? So that's what I'm going to share with you. I'm also going to share with you kind of my thoughts behind these updates, as well as how you as a freight broker might be able to navigate this and come out unscathed. Okay, so here we go. So there are 4 primary changes that the FMCSA is suggesting. One is broker has to keep records in electronic format. Okay, well, the reality is I would say that the mass of brokers out there, the heavy majority of brokers out there, probably 90+%, are already doing their rates and already doing all their documentation and their rate confirmations and everything digital, okay? It's almost all digital, very little paper today. Unlike when I started back in 2003, things were very paper intensive. We used to have filing cabinets, dozens of filing cabinets filled with carrier broker agreements and shipping documentations and everything. It was a nightmare. We actually had to expand our office because of all that. But now today, everything is digital, right? So that's not an issue, and I don't think that's going to have a major impact, all right? And it makes total sense to me. Number 2, revisions to the contents of broker records, including itemized charges and fees. So what they're looking for, if the broker provides the rate transparency to the carrier, they want an itemized breakdown of every component, including any broker related services or accessorials or per mile or, fuel surcharge. They want a full breakdown, an itemized breakdown of that. Okay. So they want a detailed breakdown. So that's proposed part 2. Part 3, brokers must provide records upon request. The FMCSA stated that the current regulation frames the broker transparency requirement as a right of the transacting parties to review the records. Now, you got to understand that broker rate transparency has been on the books for many, many decades, okay? But the fact of the matter is, it has never really truly been implemented on a large scale. Now, there may be lots of reasons behind that, but ultimately, they're trying to reinforce the fact that brokers are required to provide rate transparency on any transaction that a carrier is party to, okay? And so, but one thing you have to understand, one of the things that brokers have done over the years, and this has been going on for decades, is as a part of their broker carrier agreement, they would add a clause in there that carriers would agree to, that they would waive their right to any rate transparency documentation or any rates or commissions or financial records as it relates to that transaction. So they would add it into the broker carrier agreement, and the carrier would waive their right to request that information, okay? So that's been going on for a while. And what OIDA and the carriers are asking for is that carriers are asking that brokers cannot add that to their agreements and cannot allow carriers to waive those rights. But the fact is, the FMCSA was very clear and said, unless Congress makes a right unwaivable, then brokers can still allow carriers to waive their rights to the documentation per contract. So, right now the FMCSA does not have the ability, does not have the authority to tell brokers that they cannot add that to their agreement. So currently, as it stands today, and what I believe the new rule change is going to be, it's going to reinforce the fact that brokers can add a clause to their agreement and carriers will have the ability to waive that right. Now, if carriers don't want to waive that right, then they shouldn't sign the broker carrier agreement, right? They shouldn't accept the load. So not all brokers do that, but some brokers do. And so it would be a right of a broker to be able to do that. Okay. So that's part 3. And then part 4, hold tight, because I'm going to share my personal thoughts on this. And I'm going to share some of my frustration and some of the industry's frustration. And I just want to share that with you, but I'm getting through the updates first. This is the last one. This is number 4. Records must be provided within 48 hours of request. This provision is intended to ensure the requesting parties receive the records in a timely manner to support the resolution of issues around service or payment. Okay, so they want to be able to turn these records around in 48 hours. So those are the 4 proposed rules that the FMCSA has put out there for comments, right? Now, they have not finalized these rules, but they've put them out for comments. And I know the carriers aren't 100% happy. I know the brokers aren't 100% happy, but let me give you my 2 cents, okay? So the reality is this broker rate transparency all falls under what they call CFR 373.3C, okay? So that's kind of the regulation and the rule from the FMCSA. So that rule is completely and totally outdated and is based on a very different business model that was enacted back in the early 80s when transportation was deregulated. Back then, freight brokers acted as sales agents for carriers. So the reason why they had rate transparency in there for brokers was so that carriers knew how much the rates that the brokers were charging shippers, because they were acting contractually as a sales agent of the carrier. Now, business models have evolved over the years, and brokers are not sales agents for the carriers, okay? They're independent brokers authorized by the FMCSA to represent and be a middleman between shippers and brokers. So they don't work for either party. They actually work more for the shippers now because that's who actually pays them, but they're independent third-party brokers, okay? So that regulation is very outdated, and it's based on a very different business model from the 80s. Now, I can understand why they had that rule back in the 80s when deregulation first took place. It was probably a little scary time for carriers. It was a scary time for shippers. Nobody knew exactly what was going to happen. But the fact of the matter is, okay, that is a very outdated rule, right? And so I think the FMCSA and I think the industry as a whole has to realize why this was put in place and how the industry has changed. That's number 1. Number 2, I have a very strong opinion about this, okay? And that is this. Why should brokers, just as a basic level, why should brokers have to provide their proprietary rate data to a potential competitor? Because the reality is this, carriers are what I call are in co-opetition with brokers. They're not direct competitors, but they're definitely not, they definitely could be, right? So they're in what I call co-opetition. So those carriers that get that rate data could leverage that rate data to compete directly with brokers, right? The fact of the matter is, the 2 hardest parts about being a broker, in my opinion, are number 1, sales, developing relationships with shippers, and rating, developing and understanding the spot market, contract market, based on lanes, based on seasonality, based on fluctuation of fuel, and all the dynamics that go into freight rating. And so it's very costly, it's very time consuming, it's very expensive to not only sell, but to have a strong understanding of the spot market so that you can make sure that you're rating your shipments properly to actually get loads from your customers. Because the fact is, brokers quote loads every single day, right, to different shippers. But the shipper makes a decision based partially on the rate, but also partially based upon trust and value and relationship and everything that goes into it. So the reality is that, it's very expensive. It's proprietary data. And you don't see this in any other commercial industries where brokers have to, or, where companies like brokers have to provide this type of data because it is proprietary. It's recognized universally as proprietary data. Okay. That's number two. Number three, the FMCSA needs to stop wasting time on rate transparency, which will have a zero impact on rates. Okay. Stop prying into brokers' financial records. It's not going to have an impact. The fact of the matter is, carriers already have availability of tools for rating data. So times have changed. Technology has changed. Back in the 80s, the internet really didn't exist. Finally, in the 2000s and beyond, it really started to proliferate. And technology now allows anybody to go online and use rating tools, whether that be from the Internet Truck Stop, whether that be from the DAT, whether that be from different providers that have now created databases and have systems that you can go in and you can actually educate yourself and get market intelligence and rate intelligence. Carriers have access to as much rate intelligence as brokers do. So the fact is that has already created a competitive environment. It's already created an equal playing field, right? So the free market needs to be able to run and help you build business. And the reason why is because supply and demand is what determines rates. And that's what people have to understand. Brokers don't determine rates. Shippers don't determine rates. Carriers don't determine rates. It's the free market. It's called supply and demand. The number of trucks compared to the number of loads. If there's more trucks than loads, rates go down. If there's more loads than trucks, rates go up. Very simple. Brokers do not determine rates. And the fact of the matter is, carriers have access online to all the same rate data that brokers do. So the reality is they already have transparency. They already have the ability to educate themselves and use that data to negotiate with brokers. So it's really redundant to be able to try to force brokers into providing rating data. Okay, so that's one of the last ones. And then finally, the FMCSA needs to start focusing on the real problems in the logistics industry. Number one, fraud. Number two, theft. Currently, based on some research that I did, the annual cost of theft and fraud is over $15 billion a year. But yet, we're sitting here, OIDA, FMCSA, the TIA, arguing over rate transparency, spending hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars, probably by the time this is all over, of taxpayer money to solve a problem that's not a problem. So listen, here's the reality. As it stands today, if you are a broker and you do not want to provide rate transparency to your carriers, you have the right to add a clause to your broker carrier agreement that simply says that they waive the right to be able to receive rating documentation based on CFR 373.3-C, right? So you have the ability to add that and it can be upheld. You do not have to provide that data. Now, we don't know what the final rulemaking is going to be, but the reality is this: the FMCSA has already said that unless Congress, okay, which isn't going to happen, unless Congress says that there is a right that is unwaivable, they have to change the definition of a right, and they say that it's unwaivable, then currently we're going to be able to operate under the same system that we were operating before. And what happens is ultimately this was a complete waste of time and an exercise in futility. And so I know that carriers aren't going to be happy about this. I know that a lot of brokers aren't going to be happy about this. I know the FMCSA is stuck in the middle, but the reality is the FMCSA needs to focus on the real problems, which is theft and fraud. And if they do, maybe we can start solving those problems, because rate transparency isn't the issue. The reality is, you can look at the data. It's publicly available. Go to any large publicly traded freight brokerage, and you're going to see that on average, the profit margins for brokers is between 10 and 20% on full truckload. Now, I'm not saying that some brokers don't make 30 or 40% or more on certain loads. But what you're not factoring into the equation is that many times brokers are losing hundreds, if not thousands of dollars on loads just in order to retain their customers. So there's a lot of dynamics that go into that. I hope this makes sense to you. If it does, and if this benefited you, hit the like button now. Totally appreciate you being here. Listen, if you're curious about becoming a freight broker or a freight agent and you're looking for some help, you're looking for a guide, you're looking for a system that can walk you from A to Z, check out freightbrokerbootcamp.com. Trained over 10,000 students, had that program for over 15 years. And we offer a 100% unconditional money-back guarantee. So you can check that out. We're well known to be the most cost-effective and comprehensive online freight broker and freight agent training program. You can check that out at freightbrokerbootcamp.com. Okay, cool. So I jumped around a bit. There was a lot of information to cover, but you can catch this on replay, right? You can review this on replay if you want. You can watch this and speed it up or go to certain spots, whatever you want to do. And I will release an edited down version of this fairly soon, so you guys can actually see that. That'll hit the YouTube channel in not too long. But there's a lot of moving parts, but the reality is this. At this point, I think the FMCSA has kind of thrown their hands up in the air and is trying to appease the carrier groups and make some changes or propose changes. But the reality is this: brokers are going to be able to continue to do what you're doing. And the fact is, if there was a change that required brokers to show transparency, the fact is that the FMCSA, Congress, nobody can force a broker to do business with a carrier. So if you did business with a carrier on one load and they requested the documentation, you could always cancel the contract after that and not do business with them, because they cannot require you to do business with anybody. They can't force you to do business with any carrier, regardless of rate transparency. So I think that this was, as I said from the beginning, this is an absolute waste of time and energy, because this law is completely, this regulation is completely outdated and is based on a very different business model that doesn't exist today. And by having it, if it went through as OIDA had requested with all these different changes, it still wouldn't have a significant impact on rates. What has an impact on rates is carriers educating themselves on what the spot market and contractor rates are based on using tools, because now you're going to be able to have a much bigger data set. You're going to be able to have a much more refined look. You're going to be able to have an itemized breakdown. You're going to be able to have everything you're looking for using rating tools. And that gives you the bargaining power and the education to be able to truly negotiate with brokers. If that's your goal, if you want to make sure as you're getting paid a fair rate, the tools are out there to do it. Brokers shouldn't have to provide you their rates so that you can negotiate harder with them or go direct to their customers. So that's my 2 cents. That's what I'm sticking with. I'm sure there's some of you that are going to completely disagree, and that's okay. I'm not here to try to win a popularity contest. As a business owner, this is truly how I feel. This is how I felt since I was a broker. So since I had my brokerage, of course, I sold my brokerage back in 2016. But yeah, that's where we're at. So if you guys have questions, let's jump into Q&A. All right. So I think there's a couple questions coming through now. I'm scrolling here. Give me a minute. Oh, okay. So Julie, CFR 373.3 C. Okay. So it's CFR 373.3C. Okay. That is the broker transparency regulation. Okay, Anthony says, what are the annual recurring costs as a broker? So, annual recurring costs, the biggest cost associated with a broker is the freight broker bond. Okay. So, freight broker bond is an annual recurring cost. If you decide to have some sort of liability or contingent cargo, that's another annual cost. There are some software that you'll be billed probably monthly, like your TMS, your transportation management software, your load boards, maybe like a vetting software aware, like a Carrier 411 or a Carrier OK or something like that. So you have some of those software. You've got obviously some basic phone expense. If you have an office, if you're not working from home, you've got your UCR, which is negligible. I think that's like $60 a year, your UCR cost. So the cost is very, very low when you compare it to a typical business, right? You go out and start a pizzeria, you better have $30,000 to $50,000 or more ready to go to start a pizzeria. That's the reality. On a brokerage business, you're talking about thousands of dollars, not tens of thousands of dollars, especially if you're using factoring to pay your carriers. So I hope that helps, Anthony. If you have a follow-up, let me know. Jordan asks, what would you say is the best niche for the coming weeks? I don't base my niche on short-term. I don't base my niche based on short-term seasonality. That's not how I operate. Okay. Never did. I focus my niche on something that I want to become a true expert in, and I want to go deep. So, we've got a big market here. I'm not looking to just take a teeny little slice of it. I want to take a big piece of the pie when it comes to that niche. I want to become known as the guy or gal in that niche. Okay. So I don't do things based on short-term seasonality. But it's pretty obvious seasonality right now. What's seasonality, right? It's November. So, it's fall. What happens now? You've got a lot of consumer goods, right? Amazon is going crazy, right? All the retailers are going crazy. So the big rush now is retail. So that's where the seasonality would be mainly, right? Now, as things start to evolve, then that'll change come spring and summer and fall. That's why I was never big. We covered some seasonal freight, but it was mainly from shippers that we had year long, but they had spikes in seasonality. Like maybe they had spikes during the summer, the spring, or the fall. But yeah, I typically don't do that. But yeah, I think right now it's retail. Welcome, Eclectic Rose. Thanks for joining. Alfonso says, if I want to tie my freight brokerage into my trucking company, how would I go about doing that? Well, I'm not a lawyer and I don't play one on TV, but there are pros and cons to tying your brokerage and carrier together. If you have a brokerage and a carrier operating under the same MC or operating under the same LLC, right? There are sometimes some challenges with that I've heard from many, many students. And that is, if you have a carrier business and you add a brokerage business to it, it can impact your cargo and liability insurance. So you want to be careful before you do that, right? To make sure you check with your insurance provider and ask them, if you had a brokerage, what would happen? I believe it makes more sense to have them separate under different MCs. And the reason being, number one, it avoids that issue. You could just have a very similar company name. You could have XYZ Trucking and you could have XYZ Trucking and Logistics. Okay. Very similar name. And, those two companies are going to appear to be working together. Right. So I don't think it's going to be an issue. Although you'd have to have a separate contract with the shipper for carrier business. You'd have to have a separate contract for the carrier, on the brokerage side, if there was a contract, right? So yeah, so I don't think, I think you want to be careful trying to tie those two together, but I think you can operate them simultaneously. The benefit of having a brokerage as a carrier is obvious, right? If you're a carrier, you have 5 trucks, it means you can only move 5 loads at any given point, right? But when those trucks are all full, if you're a brokerage, you could broker 5 more loads to outsource trucks that you're not paying for, right? So it gives you a way to exponentially scale your business, scale your revenue. Okay. So that's the benefit of having a brokerage as a carrier. Hope that helps. I didn't know this, but I just looked it up. What does CFR stand for? It stands for Code of Federal Regulations. That's what it stands for. Very official. Code of Federal Regulations. So that's what it stands for, Alexander. Anthony, is QuickBooks a good software to use for brokerage? Well, for some accounting it is, yeah, but that's just your accounting. That's for invoicing, that's for receivables, that's for managing. So yeah, you can use QuickBooks. There's tons of accounting software out there, but that is not the primary software that you're going to need to run your business. Most TMSs have a lot of that have the abilities to do invoices and carrier remitting, but you are going to need some sort of accounting software where all that data goes into, and then your bookkeeper or accountant is going to be able to use that data for tax purposes. So yeah, QuickBooks is fine. Yeah, very cost effective, works fine. Yeah, if I understand the separate MCs, does that mean I'd need a separate DOT as well? In regards to having, yeah, if you have a different MC, you're going to have a different DOT. Yes, because those entities are going to be different. You might have ABC Trucking LLC, and you might have ABC Trucking and Logistics LLC. They're going to be two different LLCs. Okay, so they're two different entities that are operating from the same ownership. Okay. What do you think if you quote a customer with a 15% margin for short runs and 150 miles still thinks it's too high? Do you think I need to move on? It's impossible for me to answer that question because the reality is I don't know if you did the proper due diligence on what the spot market rate of a truck was. So if you just come up with some random rate like, oh, well, I'm going to pay the carrier $250 a mile and I'm going to add 15% on top of that, that's not going to help you, right? But if you truly did your due diligence and you understood and talked to carriers and you understand the real spot market of what a truck costs from point A to point B, whether that be a short haul or a long haul, whatever the case may be, if you understand that rate and you've determined that rate and you add 15% on top of it, now I think you're in the ballpark. Yeah. Should you add 20% or more on top of a load, especially when you have a brand new customer? Probably not. Keep your margins a little bit lower to start, and then you can expand them over time by coming into other lanes. And then, as you build trust, you can increase those rates based on demand and seasonality or need, right? So yeah, so I don't think 15% is unreasonable, but 15% of what, right? So you have to really, truly understand what the cost of a truck is. I did an entire training on this. If you go to my YouTube channel, I just did a training. The title of it is How to Do Freight Quotes for Shippers in 5 Easy Steps. If you go to my YouTube channel, it says Freight Broker Rates, How to Do Freight Quotes for Shippers, right? And you can download a cheat sheet. It walks you through a 5-step process, right? If you go to my YouTube channel, it's right there, and it'll give you all the details that you need on how to determine that spot rate so that you can then add your margin and sell it through. But if you did it properly and you can't make 15%, again, would you rather, put it this way, and this is maybe not applies to your example, but don't get stuck on 15% because here's the math. If you were doing a $5,000 load, 15%, would you rather have 15%? Would you rather have, let's put it this way. Would you rather have 10% of a $5,000 load, or would you rather have 20% of a $2,000 load? Which would you rather have? It's a math equation, right? 10% of a $5,000 load is $500 in profit. 20% of a $2,000 load is only $400 in profit. So which would you rather have? Well, you'd rather have the 10%. So don't necessarily get stuck up too much on the percentages, but I understand what you're saying. So I hope that helps. Ran a small brokerage 2 years ago, stopped in good standings. Would now be a good time to start back up? Well, I believe that rates have kind of hit the bottom and they're going to start ticking back up, particularly based upon what's going on seasonality right now. Secondly, based upon kind of the most recent election, which has a tendency to be a little bit more business friendly. So I believe now we've hit the bottom and we're bouncing off and rates are going to start to slowly climb back up. Are we going to go back to 2022 rates right away? No. It's not going to look like this, right? But I think we've bounced off. So I think what's going to happen is we're going to slowly go up over the next 5 years as a recovery starts to take place. But again, I'm not an economist and I'm just giving you my 2 cents. So it could be a great time. If I were looking at starting a freight brokerage right now, I would have absolutely no issue starting a brokerage. Why? Because of that trend. You'd rather start at the bottom and work your way up than start at the top and work your way down. Because if you can build a business when at the bottom of a rate cycle, okay, an economic cycle, and it starts to go up, you are going to be able to build your business in any economic conditions. But if you build it up here and you base it on how, back in 2022, you could jump out of a plane and land on a shipper that needed help. It was very easy to get shippers back then, and rates were increased. There was a lot of demand. There was more demand than there was supply. And we'd love to be back to that market, but it's not going to happen overnight. So I think you understand my point. I think you'd rather jump in on the incline than to jump in on the decline. Okay, cool. Any other questions? I'll tell you a quick story. Yesterday, my hot water heater blew. Okay. So I spent the better part of the entire day trying to clean that mess up and get somebody in here to replace the hot water heater. So I still got some cleanup to do. And the hot water heater guy is coming at about 1 to replace it. Thank God. So we have hot water. But yeah. And man, hot water heaters, just so you know, $1,800 for a hot water heater. Good Lord, that's a lot of money. $1,800 installed. I guess, I think I was thinking it'd probably be closer to like 12 or 1,400, but it's 1,800. I shopped around. That's kind of the standard price for a 50 gallon, which is what we need because I have girls. So, yeah, crazy, but I've got to jump and do that. So let me see if there's any other questions before we go. And listen, if you guys need help and you're looking for freight broker startup training, check out freightbrokerbootcamp.com. Most cost-effective, comprehensive online freight broker, freight agent training program. 100% unconditional money back guarantee. Now, if you guys are struggling to get shippers, maybe you've already went through some of the startup and you're struggling to get shippers, you're having a hard time getting a hold of people, you're struggling with cold calling, you don't fully understand how to get shippers, here's what I would suggest. Get on the wait list for my Freight Broker Sales Accelerator program. That is an 8-week live coaching program where I take that piece of my brain, I transplant it into your head, and I teach you how to get shippers in any economy, up or down, right? Using the exact same system that I use to do over $200 million as a freight broker. So you can get on the wait list. It's currently sold out, but if you get on the wait list, you'll get notified when spots open up. Spots do open up occasionally. Sometimes it's one this week, and then 3 weeks later there's 2, and then a couple weeks later there's another 1 or 2. They open up occasionally, and you'll be the first to be notified when they open up, so that you can then be a part of the Freight Broker Sales Accelerator. We've had a lot of great success stories come out of that. You can check that out at freightbrokerbootcamp.com/waitlist. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Hope you guys have an awesome and highly profitable week, and we'll see you next Monday on the next Freight Broker Bootcamp Live. Oh, happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Have a great Thanksgiving. Have a great holiday. I know I'm going to. Thank you.